Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Wiederhold, Executive Director of Heritage Ohio. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Division of Liquor Control Temporary Permits and DORA Regulations, as part of our monthly Revitalization educational webinar series. Today, we'll hear from Paul Kulwinski, Director of Licensing, and Kyle Erwin, Renewal and Temporary Permit Section Supervisor with the Division of Liquor Control, Ohio Department of Commerce. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control Licensing section will provide an overview of temporary permits, including who can apply, what's permitted and not, and how they interact with designated outdoor refreshment areas, more commonly known as DORA. The division will explain how to apply for temporary online permits as well. We'll have time for questions at the end of the session, so please type those in the chat box and then Devin will read them. The presentation is also available as a PDF handout in the handouts section of your chat box. We hope you'll join us again on August 3rd for our next webinar, focused on the history of the glass industry and the development of Toledo, as a teaser for our annual conference, which will be held in Toledo October 3rd to the 5th. So thank you very much for joining us today, and Paul and Kyle, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. And definitely Kyle and I are very excited to be here today and talk with you all regarding these issues. I know we get a lot of questions. You folks have a lot of questions on a lot of the changes that have been going on in the liquor realm and how that interacts with constituents that you engage with in your local community. So looking forward to that and having that conversation with you today regarding this. So as you see, it's kind of liquor laws and how they relate to your next event. One disclaimer, as always, is that any information given to you by myself, Kyle, or in the slides today should not be considered legal advice. Obviously, depending on your role, you might have a law director, local village solicitor, what have you, that would be your legal authority and would recommend reaching out to them for specifics on how the liquor laws interact with what you're trying to do. I would also point out that we are not the sole source of liquor enforcement. A lot of folks will reach out to us saying, hey, you're the division of liquor, tell me X or Y or Z. But within Ohio, we kind of have a broken up system of different agencies that handle liquor enforcement. So there is us. There is also the Ohio Department of Public Safety Investigative Unit, which are kind of the liquor agents going around with, underage sales, sales to intoxicated persons, illegal drug activity going on in a liquor permit location, right? And then obviously local law enforcement has authority. And then we also have our Liquor Control Commission, which is a separate state agency what kind of sits as a court to handle and hear and deal with any citations or violations of alleged violations of Ohio liquor law. So main point there again, we're not the sole source. There are others that may have different interpretations or different enforcement than we do. And then lastly is facts, and more facts may change an answer. So we do get a lot of questions from folks, sometimes in generality, and really it may depend on a fact or two that may change an outcome to an answer. Many times I have folks, well, you told me this, or someone told me that. Well, they did, but you said this, and now that you're saying that, changes the answer. So I guess I would add that if you have questions, if you do reach out to us for questions, the more detail you can provide and the more context certainly helps us perhaps give you a better guidance of where to look in the law or what may or may not work for your situation. That being said, one of the questions we get a lot, especially with temporary type events, is when is a liquor permit needed? And essentially, when anyone, including the qualifying nonprofit, plans to sell alcohol to its guests or the public. And it could be as much as $2 for that bottle of beer. It could be charging entrance fees, cover charges, other things of that nature. Within Ohio law, sale is really broadly defined for liquor law, and so it's not just necessarily selling that $2 bottle or $3 glass of wine. It could be, again, those cover charges, other things could constitute a sale of the alcohol. So like I said, entrance fee, cover charges. When is a liquor permit not needed? As you see on the right, kind of a picture of a wedding. Hopefully everyone's happy. I think what I would say to you is kind of think of that wedding as a guidepost of when it may not be needed. No permit generally is required if the host is providing, not selling, alcohol at the private function for those invite guest onlys. Again, wedding reception. I always say, I guess, is that really true? Because as a wedding, you're probably expecting gifts or some money hopefully to be provided to you. But, again, I am not charging my guests. I am buying the alcohol. I am providing it to my guests at no cost. We're not charging a cover charge, though maybe a good idea. Not charging entrance fees or those things. So in that case, it's invite only, it's limited, it's a private event. And in that case, permit would not be needed. And I should caveat here too, that would also come into play if the location I'm having it at does not also have a liquor permit. So a lot of times we get permit holders who say, I want to have, suspend my privileges or let people come in, bring their own stuff for a private party. General rule is once a permit, always a permit. And so you can't necessarily stop your privileges from 12 until 2, have a private party, people bring in their own alcohol. That would be a problem. But if your location does not have a permit issued to it, then again, it could be something that would allow for that kind of private only non-permitted event to occur. So temporary permits, kind of going through some of these things. One, want to highlight that they are different in some respects from regular permits. What I mean by that is, one, we get a lot of questions on mobile permits. Well, can I take my permit at X restaurant and move it over here? No. Ohio does not have mobile permits. So I know there's obviously a lot of explosion of food trucks, what have you, and they can go from location A to B and provide the food, but currently Ohio law does not permit or allow for mobile food, mobile bar permits where people can take things and move them around. Similarly, I would add, in the expansion's a little tricky. We can talk a little bit later about that, but I can't do the mobile in the sense of, well, I'm not really moving the permit, but I'm expanding my permit across the street, and I'm going to go into the park and set up a tent and sell my alcohol. Again, you would need a permit for that, and you can't just necessarily run off your base permit at your bar or restaurant that you may have. I would add that there is not an objection process for temporary permits, generally speaking. And, as you may know, for some of you who deal with the retail locations, bars, carryouts, restaurants within your communities, by law, we are required to send notice to the local legislative authorities when those permits are applied for to see if they object, want a hearing. That process is not in play for temporaries. So occasionally, not often, but occasionally we might go to a locality that says, well, we don't want this temporary issued. Well, appreciate that, but there's no process in law that allows for that. So although noted, if the temporary permit applicant meets the requirements, that permit's going to get issued because there's really nothing we can do, at least in our direct, provisions of law to stop that. And then moreover, I would also add that the temporary permits cannot be for profit or gain of any person or organization. So, in a broad sense of the term, we're talking about nonprofits. Doesn't necessarily have to be 501c3s for all of the different permit types, but it certainly has to be, not for the profit or gain of any one individual or organization. And then most of the temporary permits are also subject to local option election, wet dry laws, meaning that when an applicant applies, we have to check with the county where that event will be held, Board of Elections, to determine what's the ward and precinct history and run it against any votes to see whether the types of sales they're trying to have there are permitted. And so in Ohio, we have wet dry laws, which are for the sale of alcohol, not necessarily the consumption, but the sale. And so for a lot of our temporary permits, we actually do need to check that status, which the point there, among other things, is that that's an external agency we need to reach out to upon application, which is a reason which we'll talk more later. The sooner you can get folks to apply, the better, because when they apply 2 days before the event and it's subject to local option, we got to go reach out. Now we're dependent on another county agency to respond to us, to get us the information back timely so that we can process what we need to do and get the answers we need. So the more time we have built in upfront, certainly always better. And And then the last thing I would add for temporaries is that there are no carry-out sales permitted. So the temporaries are designed for what we would call on-premises consumption, but you're not, setting up a retail shop and selling carry-out like you might do at a grocery store or a gas station, what have you. Adding on to temporary permits, there's 13 types. There are, a lot of exceptions to the temporary permit provisions that are kind of geared more specifically to certain types of organizations or events. As I mentioned a little bit ago, we request or ask that you file 30 days before your event, again, giving us time to get through any questions or issues we may have, and answers, responses on the application at Board of Elections, as I mentioned, and whatever else may come up. So certainly better to plan ahead. And then let us help us help you. And again, kind of along those lines that, the more you can give us up front, the more detailed you can be, the more, accurate in your application, certainly helps us help you. So, those who wait at the last minute run the risk of us just not having the time to process it or get the information we need. And certainly we hate to see that happen. But at the end of the day, we issue somewhere in the range of about 10,000 temporary permits any given year. And, understand occasionally things fall through the cracks, or, one slips past the goalie that someone forgot about, and we're there to try and do what we can. But in fairness to the others who did apply early, who were, complete in their application, we want to make sure we're not sacrificing their events because, someone repeatedly files last minute, or, just kind of blows past deadlines and what have you. So wanted to quickly highlight some of the temporary permits that are out there, and particularly the main ones that most folks would use, that would be most general. So one is the F permit. F permit is beer sales only, and it could be for an event up to 5 days. There's a $40 fee. One thing a little bit here is only 2 F permits can be issued to the same qualifying organization in any 30-day period. So if you had an event in your locality and you wanted a beer, temp permit all 4 weekends, you could have, Charity X apply for 2 of those and Charity Y apply for the other 2, and you would be covered. But Charity X cannot do an F permit for all 4 weekends because they would run afoul of that 2 limit provision in the 30 days. One thing that's kind of nice about the F permit is local option does not apply. So again, we can process that a little more quickly because of that, not needing to reach out to that external side. I am also throwing the reference codes, some of these provisions in there for future reference to look at kind of more of the details in those specific permit types. Another one that's pretty common is F2. Again, you can do beer and intoxicating liquor, which for those who may not know, in Ohio, there's alcoholic beverages, I would say, which are divided into 2 general types. There's beer, and then there's intoxicating liquor. And within intoxicating liquor, there is wine, high proof spirits, and then what we call mixed beverages, which is defined in law as basically your prepackaged, lower proof beverages made by the manufacturer. So think of your margarita mixes that are already made in the bottle, your Arnold Palmer things that are already made up. It's not a wine necessarily, not a beer, but it's kind of that lower proof beverage that's mixed by the manufacturer and sold that way, which is different than what I would call a mixed drink, where you go to a bar and say, give me a Jack and Coke or rum and Coke, and they're mixing it behind the bar. I would call that more of a mixed drink, distinct from a mixed beverage. So again, F2 basically lets you sell everything for on-premise until 1 a.m., and that's up to 4 days. Here, as you see, local option regulations would apply. So again, you would have to account for that time. And so we do have occasionally times where someone applies, but we can't have the event because unfortunately they're dry for spirits or they're dry for whatever, and they can't sell that type of product. There is an ability to issue it jointly with a D permit holder. Again, this really ties more to liability. We see the fees amount listed. And then again, the distinction here is the F2 is 1 permit every 30 days for that organization. So unlike the F, which gave you 2, the F2 gives you 1. Couple ones to highlight, the F8 or the F9. Generally speaking, kind of summarizing the 2 together, essentially ties to more of a nonprofit that is going to operate, manage publicly owned property. Could be a park, could be, orchestral venues, what have you, on behalf of the public entity, and certain conditions need to be met. I would refer you to the F8, F9 specifically to kind of hash out those certain conditions. There are certain population requirements, certain things that may come into play as to who can get to F8, F9. But the reason I pointed out is, depending on your situation, may be a good fit, in part because it's valid for 9 months. So we see it a lot, maybe that April to Labor Day, right, time frame, where we're going to have events going on. We don't want to have this organization continue to apply. So it's, again, more for that type of situation. These are actually explicitly in their relative statutes subject to hearing provision. So a little unique to me, because you have to be working with the public entity, but so you would think they'd be on board, but we do have to notice the locals to see if they want to object to the issuance of these. I don't know if we've ever had it, but it is in there. So again, add the potential time delay. And then one nice thing about the F8 or F9, it also explicitly builds in that, let's say you had an F9 permit, lasts for 9 months, issued at X park, but at some point during that duration of the 9 months, a different charity wants to apply for an F2. We could issue the F2, temporarily suspend the F9, let the F2 event happen over that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, let's say, and then the F9 permit would resume operation thereafter. So that's kind of a nice interplay that allows for other charitable orgs that meet the requirements for other temporary permit types to be able to still have their events, even though that F8, F9 is valid for 9 months. So I guess in the converse, by having that 9-month permit, you're not necessarily locking out other qualifying orgs to be able to seek a different temporary permit at that same location when that F8 or F9 is valid. And then, as I said, the types of events, could be a park type situation, could be a concert area. I think Dayton, we have one that's at like a publicly owned concert venue. I think they have an F8 or 9, I can't recall. I know Cincinnati has one of the other F8, F9. Columbus may have some. So again, there are various localities that have these permits issued to them for the summer type events that they have ongoing. A few other temps worth mentioning as well is the F10 farmers market. So we see this one as well, and we've actually updated our applications on our website for the farmers market. There's certain qualifying factors. You have to have like 4 or more qualifying permit holders, which would be wineries, Ohio-based wineries, that would be participating in the event. There's other certain restrictions on how much they can sell, what they can do. And again, the F10 would be valid for 9 months as well. And then there is the F12, which is a bit newer. I would say it's similar to the F2 in that who qualifies for it and how it kind of works. The only distinction I would add is 2 things. One, it's a different cost, but that you can only sell beer and wine. So you can't do the spirits, mixed beverages under the F2. And then equally, it is valid for 90 days, which is a little bit lengthier of time than you would otherwise have for the F2 permit. So that is kind of a summarization of the different temporary permits that are available in Ohio and most likely applicable for you or your constituents.
And Paul, I just wanted to going back to the F10. I know a couple slides earlier we said that there wasn't a permit that would allow for carryout. This is actually one that the F10 is an exemption. Yep. Yeah, for the A2s or A2F permit holders that are on site for the F10, they can actually sell in sealed containers for consumption off premises. So there is that option for A2s for the F10.
And that's why he's the best supervisor of the temporary section in the business, adding those nuggets. So with that said, some of the documents that we need in the process may include, and one for sure would be kind of a clear description of the premises. So when applying, we need to know, not only for our purposes, but law enforcement purposes and patron purposes, what's the premises here? What's the boundaries? Is it, you know, this square block? Is it, you know, this street to that street? Where are we talking about? And again, right, fair rules for law enforcement to know where people should and should not have alcohol, and then moreover for the patrons to know too. We also normally notify local police chief or county sheriff, depending on the situation. Hey, this permit's going to be issued. We like to have the applicant get consent there, but as I said, there's no objection process. So even if the local police are not going to sign off, we still, if they meet the requirements, would issue the permit, but we will give some notice to them prior to the issuance that the permit is going to be held there. Tenancy, right? We need to have some documented authority that you have the right to be where you are. So we want to make sure, you know, do you own the property? Are you leasing it? Who are you leasing it from? You know, how are you, what authorization do you have to be there? And then moreover, like I said, just kind of that complete application. Did you answer all the questions? Did you provide us the information we need, contact information, what have you, so that we can fully process your application? And again, hopefully avoid the back and forth of, well, you know, you forgot this, or you didn't send this, or you didn't fill this out, right? And again, just delays that we would rather avoid on both sides, I'm sure. And then the permit fee as well, right? With the check made out in the appropriate amount, made out to the right, you know, Division Liquor Control or Treasurer, you know, State of Ohio, so that we can process the fee. We've gotten checks before made out to attorneys or, you know, whatever. And again, those types of things we can't process. So, or they're not signed, or they don't have the amount written in, or whatever. So, you know, check, cash, or check, money order, you know, cashier's check would be the preferred routes of permitting fees. A few things quickly also I would just add to be mindful of when in the temporary permit realm. I know I said they're different a little bit than your general retail permits, and they are in some respects, but at the end of the day, they are a retail permit. And so they kind of are treated similarly from an enforcement perspective. So you need to make sure as a temporary permit holder that you're getting the product through the proper source, meaning you're buying it through our 3-tier distribution system, going through a Ohio licensed distributor or direct to the manufacturer. You can't be going to Kroger and buying the beer and then selling it. As I always say, you know, anyone, kids or dealt with youth sports or something like that, you know, you go to Costco, you go to Walmart, you go wherever, Sam's Club, you buy the water, you resell it. That's water. Can't do that for alcohol. You can't go to the retail side, buy it, and then resell it at your event. You have to go through the proper channels to get that product. Equally for spirits, you have to go through an Ohio agency store. Don't be going to Kentucky to buy this bourbon that's not sold in Ohio and then come back to your event and sell that stuff. You need to buy it through the proper sources for your event. Equally donated products are generally not allowed. There are some exceptions listed there. But so again, like I said, proper source. Also, one thing I'd mention, I had a person I talked to a while back. There's no exclusive deals. We have a provision in Ohio law called Tide House. Long ago, prohibition type stuff, but essentially is a antitrust, if you will, where, you know, way back in the day, right, what led to prohibition was in part the manufacturers were very powerful, kind of controlled the retail side. And so the Tide House is essentially dividing the tiers that you can't, you know, like Ghostbusters, you can't cross the streams, you can't cross the tiers. And so, like I said, I had a person who reached out, well, I always follow the law and I do this, and these people don't do that. And had mentioned to me, you know, well, I was working with, I can't recall if it was a manufacturer or distributor, and they told me they'd sponsor my event, give me money if I only sold their product. And then I had to break it to the lady, yeah, that violates Ohio law because that's an exclusive deal. You can't do that. So again, the retail side, the temp permit holder decides what they want to sell and purchase from the distributor. That's not to say sometimes there's not sponsorship, but again, in exchange for X, you can't necessarily be exclusive to Y, right? So there's some fine lines there. Equally labor, what, you know, distributors can provide, manufacturers, it kind of gets dicey on some of those things. So again, you know, just be mindful that as the retail permit holder, you know, if you're working with breweries, you should be the one selling, you know, buying the product at the right prices from them or from the distributor. You should be the one manning the event, selling the product, you know, pouring the product. So there's some things there. And again, that might be where you want to have your people talk to legal counsel or can reach out to the division to ensure things are being done correctly. A few last things: can't give alcohol away without, unless otherwise permitted. Can't do unlimited drinks. So you could do drink tickets, kind of purchased and priced accordingly, but we can't say, hey, for $50 all you can drink, right? Bad idea in many ways, and also prohibited by law. I would also quickly remind, and normally I think most people get this, but until that permit's in hand, can't be selling the alcohol or arguably purchasing it either, right? This is like a driver's license. Well, hey officer, I passed my test, I just don't have it yet. I appreciate that, but until you actually have that driver's license, or in this case, liquor permit in hand, shouldn't be selling. And then kind of dovetailing into some of the other stuff about drinks and a DORA. So again, on a temp permit, unless you're in a DORA, you can't be taking the drinks off the permit premises, which is no different than a retail location. If I'm at a restaurant, minus certain exceptions, I can't be taking these drinks outside and just wandering around. That would be an open container violation. So again, something to kind of be mindful of. So transition a little bit on DORAs and temporary permits. I know you guys, as I understand it, have some interest in kind of the interplay there. So as Matt had alluded, designated outdoor refreshment area, we call DORA. Some people also call ORA, outdoor refreshment area. Couple quick things on that. It's a locally driven process, and it's created by the locals, that being the DORAs. The provisional law for that is 4301.82, I want to say, the DORAs. And really what a DORA is creating an open container exception, right? Ohio law generally says you can't be walking around with alcohol open, just drinking it willy-nilly, but there are a lot of exceptions, and one of which is essentially the DORA. And so, let's talk a little bit more about temporary permits for those events within a DORA and how that interplays. So I guess what I would add is that within a DORA, including a temp permit, as I mentioned, a temp permit is essentially a retail permit. So if I bought a drink from X bar and wanted to take it in my DORA cup into the DORA, fine. What I can't do though is take that drink into the DORA and then take it from the DORA into another bar that's within the DORA. So I can take my drink, leave X bar, drink it in the DORA, take it to another business that's not a permit holder that is willing to let me come in there and consume, but I can't take one drink from one permit premises to another. That I cannot do. And so similarly with the temp permit, I can't take my drink from X bar into the DORA and then into the temp permit. It's a retail permit location. I equally can't take my drink from the temp permit into the DORA into a bar. Same thing. So, kind of some things to think of there. And then the temporary permit premises versus the DORA premises. So let's assume I make a DORA that is, 100 feet by 100 feet square, right? And within that, I have a temp permit. So a couple things. One, I can't make a permit premise, including a temporary permit, large enough that it basically covers up the whole DORA. Can't do that. And I can't have the temp permit block the ingress egress of other businesses either. So I guess my point essentially is the larger you make your permit premises for the temporary permit, the smaller you've made the DORA where people can go. Because as I mentioned above, you can't cross the drinks from different places, right? So I guess you really need to think in certain situations, what's the goal here, right? If I were having in my city square a concert, that city square is a DORA, and I have bars surrounding the city square that are participants in the DORA, then what am I trying to do, right? If I want people to be able to go to the bars, the restaurants ahead of the event, get drinks, bring them into the city park area, which is a DORA, to enjoy the concert, great. But if I also want to sell alcohol at the concert, then the question becomes, well, how big of a temporary permit size do you want that to be? The bigger it is, the less ability the people coming from the bars and restaurants with their drinks can go into that area, because now they're entering a temporary permit and they can't take those drinks in. So, you have to kind of think of the interplay of the sizes. Do you want to make the temporary permit rather small, that you know, I could sell it, I could have a small area for consumption, but then I could take those drinks into the bigger door area and intermingle with the other bars. I mean, maybe that's what you're trying to do, but like I said, I think there's some thought that has to go into that. Like I said, what are you trying to accomplish here? We do have some guides and resources as well on our website under our local government resource tab on the left-hand side. We'll look at that later. That kind of walks through the DORAs, talks about that, and touches on this situation for you guys. I would also add that DORAs are not permits. We've had some people ask in the past about that. It's not a permit. It's just a designation on the permit, or depending on the timing, a letter from us letting the permit holder know, hey, you're within the boundaries, you qualify because you have the appropriate type of permit, and so you are within a DORA. I would add, we've had questions like this too. I mean, just because you're in the DORA doesn't mean as the permit holder you necessarily have to participate. Equally, a non-permitted business, you know, a art gallery doesn't have to allow patrons in either. I believe it's to them. So there's that. I would equally say we don't get in the game of letting X in the DORA, Y not in. I mean, that would be something you would have to do on the creation side of how you make the boundaries and how you would lay it out. But you know, if you make it a square and within that square there's 5 permit holders that qualify by law, then we're issuing the designation to those 5 permit holders. We're not going to, you know, single out and say, well, these 4 within the boundary are okay, this one's not. No, if they're within the boundaries, they're going to get the ORA designation if they qualify in the law. Like I said, we do have available resources online that you can go to. We also do have a place to email questions. So the DORA@com.ohio.gov is a great place to email any DORA related questions, particularly from your guys' end, with more like the local governments or different constituent groups that are maybe dealing with the locals on creating the DORAs. We also ask that you send any of the creation documents to that email so that we can process them timely. And then we're going to jump in here real quick. We have that next email there for the CEDs, which are the community entertainment districts, or the revitalization districts, RDs. And so that's a separate email account for a similar, you know, question answer area, but also submitting the local government documents for the creation thereof. We also, the CED RD email is a good place. We have permit holders or their attorneys who will want to reach out to us and say, hey, I want to apply in X CED. Can you tell me how many permits are available? Great place to email is that. We can normally get back to you pretty quickly with that information. So CEDs, real quick, again, created by local governments. You know, it has its own quota system. So quick caveat, as you may or may not know, for some of the traditional retail permits, carry out bar restaurants, actually operate within a what I call population-based quota. So there's so many permits available within a particular locality based upon the population that you have, and it's all set out in law on the ratios, how it all works. But then we also have these permits that are quota exempt, where the legislature has created one-off permits that operate outside of the quota. There's ones for community art center type situations. There's ones for airports. There's ones for hotels, motels, and certain classifications. There's ones for your kind of cookie cutter, you know, Friday, Applebee, Olive Garden type places. There's all kinds of them out there that have certain requirements, and if you meet those, then great, you get outside the quota. But the D5J, which is the CED permit, has its own quota within the creation of the CED statute. So as I said here, it's so many permits based on acreage, but the most you can get within any particular CED is 15. Generally, the CEDs are geared more towards the larger municipalities. So Cincinnati has a bunch, Columbus has a bunch, Cleveland has a bunch, Toledo has a bunch, Dayton has several. And so, you know, if you're familiar with Columbus, like Easton Town Center, I think there's at least 2, maybe 3 CEDs there now. Cincinnati, especially over the Rhine area, has a bunch of them. And again, the D5J is really to gear towards development. If we're going to rehab an area, develop an area for a large entertainment area, right, depending on the quota where that municipality may be, I assume the businesses coming in want some assurance that they're going to be able to invest the money, set up the shop, and be able to secure a liquor permit and not have to necessarily worry about are there permits even available for me to have? So again, there's that CD. We do again have a guide on our website under local government resource that goes into more detail about CEDs and how that works. Here's the reference code. 2 different provisions you got to look at for CEDs on how they interplay in the Ohio Revised Code, but there they are. Revitalization districts, quickly, again, similar to a CED in theory, but there's some different restrictions on those, a little bit more nuanced. Population requirements here as well. I would say revitalization districts a little bit more geared towards your smaller townships, municipalities. And there's, I think this revitalization has like 7 or 8 different population requirements you'd have to meet to establish one. So there's 7 or 8 potential criteria, one of which you need to meet to get it. Unlike CEDs, the statute allows 1 revitalization district per jurisdiction. So, while Columbus could have 10 CEDs, a smaller locality under revitalization may only have the ability to establish 1. And again, here are the provisions of law that talk about the D5L permit, not only covering the creation thereof, but the permit as well, and what you need to have to meet that. Some of the caveats I'll kind of throw in here, a little bit unique to the revitalization. There's provisions about how much food to, compared to the total gross annual receipts that an applicant would have to meet. Obviously, they, like the CD or the DORA for that matter, have to be within the boundaries of that. And then within the revitalization district, there cannot be any D5 permits available at the time of applying, or creation thereof. So, if we had an applicant apply for a revitalization district and there were D5 permits permitted or, available within the quota, then we would push them and say, no, by law, you have to get the D5 instead of the D5L. And I would add that it's same price really to their benefit, because the D5's a little bit more mobile on transfers to other localities. There's not the food requirement, to the annual receipts. And it really, in essence, other than a few of the extra hurdles you'd have to get a D5L, is going to give you the same privileges that the D5L would otherwise give you as far as what you can sell, the hours of which you can sell it. So very similarly situated without some of the extra hurdles, but that's what the statute says, is that if they're available, you have to take that. One other thing that is also mentioned is we cannot issue a D5L to an adult entertainment establishment, which I believe is defined in a different part of law under the criminal code as to what that would be. So kind of transitioning off a little bit, but some other things that may come up within your localities, or certainly, I'll say hot topics, but things that are out there, is the Ohio legislature over the summer created an exception for charitable raffles. And I use the word raffles, although it's a little bit more nuanced than just raffles of alcoholic beverages. So there are certain requirements, one of which there are certain organizations that can actually qualify for this, and it's limited. 501c3s, I think there's an internal revenue code, political orgs under like 527, I think are the only 2 off the top of my head that would qualify. There are restrictions on where the alcohol can be obtained. It has to be from a proper source of, a retail location in Ohio that has a permit, or specifically on the spirits from an Ohio agency store. So go to your grocery store, you see that OHLQ logo, that would tell you they're an agency store selling spirits on behalf of the state. So you'd have to obtain it from the right location and right source. And then for certainly any spirits that are being raffled off, we have this on our website, a place that has the information, kind of the specifics, the requirements, but also has a web form, because you are required to, or I should say the Charitable org is required to provide the receipts of the purchase of the product when it is spirits to us. So I think even beyond spirits, beer, wine, is a good idea to have those receipts for any law enforcement type issue that may come up. But in the case of high proof spirits, you're actually required to send those receipts to us prior to your event, so that we have record of that it was properly obtained from a proper source. So like I said, on our website, we do have information about that that would guide you to some of those more detailed specifics. A couple last things, just wanted to highlight some other changes that might affect people within your localities regarding the liquor law provisions. Recently, I think again this summer, the Ohio legislature made changes to Sunday sales. So a permit that is issued for, let's say, a restaurant, carry out, whatever, is generally going to give you, if you're wet and can have those sales there under that local option law, is really covering Monday through Saturday. Selling alcohol on Sundays is a different issue, different question. And local option may be different for that as well. So again, I think folks may sometimes think, well, I have a permit, it gives, not necessarily. So what I would highlight here is that when the legislature made the change, people still need what we call a D6 liquor permit, which is the ability to sell intoxicating liquor, things other than beer, on Sundays. Still need that permit. What changed was, in Ohio law, there used to be variations on the D6 and local option laws on hours of sale on Sundays. So again, if you ever went to a grocery store and you might have seen a sign, next to the wine, can't sell on Sundays until after 10 a.m. or until after 11 a.m. or years ago until after 1 p.m. That's what's changed, is that now if you are wet and have a D6 on Sunday, you can sell the intoxicating liquor, the spirits, the wine, the prepackaged mixed beverages at the same time you would otherwise be able to sell that on Monday through Saturday. That's the difference. You still need that permit. So I know we had a few folks call in, well, hey, when can I start selling my stuff on Sundays? You can't because you don't have a D6, or you can't because you're dry. But if you have the D6, the hours have changed to marry up or be the same as you would ever otherwise have Monday through Saturday for that product. Likewise, they did put into law, used to be the hours of sale for certain types of permits was based in a rule, administrative rule. The legislature codified that in the statutes now, especially for the D5 permits. So there were a few previous D5s that were sales until 1 a.m. and they've now made them all 2:30. I just realized a typo. Not PM, that'd be pretty early, and I'm sure that wouldn't work well for the restaurants. It's 2:30 a.m., I apologize. So the D5s are now all 2:30 a.m. That they can sell up until, as opposed to the differentiation on some were 2:30, some were 1 a.m. And I would add, in Ohio, that is, generally speaking, the only end times we have are either 1 a.m. or 2:30 a.m. are the two times which sales must cease. And you can only start selling at 5:30 a.m. in the morning. So basically between 2:30 a.m. till 5:30, no sales, or 1 a.m. till 5:30 a.m., no sales, depending on the type of permit you have, would be out there. Lastly, I would also add that within the legislature, there was what we call like temp law within the budget bills that allowed for temporary expansions. And so normally a liquor permit, whether it's a temporary or a retail location, or any location for that matter, has a defined permit premises. And there are abilities to add on permanently in addition to that. So think of, again, a restaurant that wants to add a patio that's attached maybe on the sidewalk or in the back. They can do a permanent expansion request. We would go out, look it over, make sure it meets rules and regulations. And then if it did, approve it and add it on to their actual permit description, official definition of their permit size, what have you, and it gets added. In the current state of things, especially with COVID and trying to, I think, accommodate businesses and help for social distancing, the legislature, and we were actually doing this earlier as well, before the legislative change, we're allowing temporary expansions where, provided certain conditions are met, you could do something on a more temporary basis, right? So this is not a temporary permit, temporary expansion of a current permit that's out there. So let's say, again, a D permit holder has a parking lot next door to their business and they want to have an event on a weekend or on a Friday night or Saturday night or something like that. Parking lots, generally speaking, would not qualify for a permanent expansion, but under the current provisional law, may qualify for temporary. And so we do have on our website as well, kind of a difference between permanent expansion, temporary expansion, how that works. Temporary expansions are things that we don't, that being the division, do not approve. You would go through local government, potentially, depending on the property you're trying to use. It have to be like adjacent to your location. You have to have the authority to be there, whether it's, again, you own it, you have permission from the landlord or the real property owner, or permission from the city if it's on public property, like a sidewalk. You are required to give notice. We have an email, which is notify.dolc@com.ohio.gov, which is where you would have to notify us, and it also notifies public safety through that email to let us know that you're doing a temp expansion at a particular location. So again, those are still out there, may be useful for certain situations, and also may be useful in the temporary permit side. So, you know, if you're trying to get a temporary permit, maybe a temporary expansion is a possibility instead. And we've had a few of those come up where they'll ask, well, we need to do this, we want to do that. Okay, you can get a nonprofit and, you know, they can apply, or, you know, maybe a temporary expansion is an alternative that would really accomplish the goal you're trying to do and would accommodate the needs that you're trying to do without having to go through a different permit application process. Let's see, so the other thing that I would also add is, as you may have seen or heard, we had drinks to go, which now continues and was actually put into law by the legislature, and revision, or the revised code site is there. These are drinks that are sealed. So, you know, I think we had potentially a lot of, you know, Mexican restaurants doing the margaritas or something like that to go. So I buy X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to sell it to go with their, you know, with my meal. And so one of the things with the drinks to go is it does require the purchase of a meal, not define what a meal is. There are some limitations potentially on sizes, how that works, what can be sold. But again, it allows drinks that were otherwise normally allowed for on-premise or geared towards on-premise consumption to be, provided certain requirements are met, sold for off-premises consumption with that meal purchase. So if I wanted my tacos and a margarita, I could get my taco meal, order that margarita to go, the restaurant would seal it up, send it on its way, and I could take it with me to eat and consume at home. So that's something that's still out there as well. Matt did mention in closing that we do have the online portal. We can, you know, kind of show you guys through that, but, you know, we do have that option. We do have on our website the different permit applications that are out there as well, that can be submitted by paper. So like I said, we do have the online portal as well, which the nice feature of that is it does allow for not only electronic submission, but various payment methods, which would be credit card, electronic fund transfer, that would not require a paper check, you know, being sent to us. So it does help, you know, speed up some process on that. But I would also add, if you're going online, as I mentioned before, we still need to go through Board of Elections, potentially other process review. So just because one applies online today, we're not Amazon, unfortunately, doesn't mean the permit gets ready to be issued tomorrow, right? So that lead time is still recommended heavily, even though you're filing online, because again, we still need to get through it, look at it, determine what needs to be sent where. So, you know, while it does help on some facets of things and certainly makes it a little more secure, you know, we're not waiting on mailing delays or things getting lost in the mail. You know, I still would heavily recommend that folks apply timely. With that said, some other things just to make you aware with the division, we do have online renewals for our permit holders, our current issue permit holders, our, you know, manufacturers, our breweries, our wineries, our distilleries, our retail locations, all can apply to renew their liquor permits online. We're actually just finishing up our June permit renewals online. As I mentioned, we do have the temporary permit applications up there as well. We have been going through and updating many of our forms, applications, outbound communications, trying to make them more clear, concise, more, you know, layperson language versus the legalese, trying to ask more detailed questions to really get the information we need up front so that we can minimize and hopefully eliminate as much as possible the back and forth of, you know, you told me X, Y, and Z, oops, but now I need to know, ABC, trying to see what we can do to get as many of those questions out of the way so that we just have the information we need and can process the application accordingly and more effectively and efficiently. We also have, since May of 2021, stood up a call center, which you can contact. I think that the better way is file inquiry@com.ohio.gov. And so it kind of generates well, it does generate a ticketing system. So you get a response ticket, it'd be tracked, it'd be assigned to the appropriate person within the division who can best answer that question. So whether it's, I have an application pending, what's the status, or what more needs to be done, that's one place to go. Or, generally if there's some general questions, right, that someone might need, that's also a general place to go as well, that can get some responses to you guys on, or your constituents on certain issues. I would add though that for the DORAs, for the CEDs, for the RDs, the previously mentioned emails are better because again, that's more of a targeted area that a limited amount of staff, myself included, have access to, that we can really hone in and make sure we're getting that prompt response to those more, as I said, focused target populations, to make sure that we're handling that in a different area so it doesn't just come into the general feed of things. We also have been updated our website as part of a, I think, statewide initiative, and are trying to continue to refine it, providing more resources for folks to go through, more targeted information for folks to go through. Our communications folks have done a great job. We're actually putting together listservs, which you can sign up for on the website, and we'll include in our communications outbound of where to go, how to sign up, so that if you are economic development, or if you're city council people, or if you're law directors, or if you're retail shops within the community, you can sign up there, tell us who you are, tell us a little bit about you, which then allows us to better target communications to folks on reminders for renewals, or reminders of objection times coming up, or reminders on legislative changes, or things that are going on, so that again we can target the message to the people who need to hear it, and not send a blanket to anybody, and half that population, the message we're really trying to get out, or the changes we want you to know about, don't apply to you. So we're really trying to focus in on that. And then again, we do have our website here, which does have some of that general information. So I guess I'll try and click on that real quick and see if I can pull this over onto my page, which hopefully everyone can see. So again, our main page, we have information about renewals. Left-hand side is kind of our targeted hierarchical menu of where to go. Kind of your quick hit is under our what are you looking for. So again, kind of that targeted, quick, commonly accessed areas, from temporary permit applications, licensing updates, reminders, which includes legislative changes, things of that nature, searchable liquor control information on permit holders, who has active permits within your area, who has ownership interest disclosed to us within those areas. All of that stuff is there that folks can go look at. And then renewal information is there as well, which again has detailed stuff for folks to look at. So like I said, temporary permits, we have guides and resources up there. We have a FAQ chart that kind of lists out the different types of temps, different things people can do, has access to the online account for how to do that, some tips and tricks. That information I mentioned about DORAs and temporary permits would be on there. And then you also have access to the applications and forms that you can do and apply paper, or as I said, you can apply online as well. So all of that type of good stuff is up there. And then I lastly highlight for the local government. Again, as I mentioned, we have local government resources. So, we have information here about creating CEDs, revitalization districts, DORAs, how to object to permits that are within your area that you have the ability to do, how to deal with problem locations, major event waivers, distribution monies that come to the locals for the permits that are issued in their area. So all of that types of stuff is here and available for you to kind of look through and access for information that might be helpful to you. At this point, I know we're coming up on time. I don't know if there's any questions or anything that anyone has, but I think that is what we have.
That was wonderful, Paul. Kyle, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a lot of great information that will be put up on our YouTube channel. There are quite a few questions for you. So Devin, if you could facilitate those, please.
Sure. All right. Let's start off with a simpler question here. What would be both Kyle and Paul, the guidelines for timeline on submitting a temporary permit? What's a really good simplified way to tell people, if we were going to start a brand new event, really how long beforehand should they start the ball rolling to get their permit taken care of?
We generally default to saying 30 days is kind of the timeline that generally works. I would just say too, if especially that F8, F9, or if it's a real big event for your community, right? Don't hesitate to reach out from the government side to give us a heads up, because I know like we had one in a location up Northeast Ohio. They reached out, hey, we have this one for the city. The city's, it's kind of a big deal for us. And again, in those limited instances, doesn't hurt to kind of give a heads up just to make sure we can keep eyes and ears. But 30 days is what I would say is the preferred time frame. And I think Kyle, you would agree, 30 days usually works where we can work out any issues and have enough time to process.
Yeah, having it to us by 30 days is normally plenty of time for us to turn it around. So absolutely.
Thank you. So Kaylee has a question on temporary permits. For the clarification on the profit and gain of any person or organization, can the sales of beer and spirits for fundraising for a nonprofit be done? And can you talk about that a little bit more?
So I guess if I'm understanding the question correctly, certainly the monies brought in would be for the gain of the nonprofit or that association, right? So yeah, I mean, if I'm selling alcohol under my temp permit, I expect that the nonprofit is going to get money. Where you run into issues is, is this really a farce? I'm using this nonprofit as a straw person, but in reality, what I'm doing is charging them exorbitant amount of rent, or really trying to use it as a way for me individually outside of the organization to profit off of this. Or again, a retail location, hey, I'll go to this nonprofit, you apply, and I'm gonna really take all the benefit here, and then just kind of oh, here's $500 for your troubles, right? So one thing I guess I would say for the temporary permit organizations is be mindful of who is coming to you and asking to apply, because again, they're going to be the permit holder. So if you had some concert and promoter and says, hey, we want to have this concert, and let's go to this charity to apply for a permit because their for-profit wouldn't qualify, right? Not saying that can't happen, but just be mindful of the fact that it's your permit, and if intoxicated sales were made or underage people were sold to, you're the permit holder, and your charity is the one that not only name reputations out there, but would be responsible for any sanctions, fines, what have you, that could result from that. So just be mindful of that. But certainly the charity could profit in that respect and take the money, but it's just more that individual people or other for-profit entities should not be the singular focus of who's getting this money through the temp process.
And kind of piggybacking off something you just mentioned, what sort of training opportunities are there available for people that will be serving at events?
Sure. So the Department of Public Safety, Ohio Investigative Unit, does what they call this ASK training. And I think they actually offer it online now as well. Or I don't know if they still come to locations. I think they do. But as I mentioned, I know they do now offer it online. Great training, kind of goes through, tips and tricks, how to look for underage issues, different things of that nature. So that would be one training I think that would certainly be available and probably a good resource for folks looking to do that.
Thanks. Jimmy has a question about wineries. Are all wineries in Ohio able to wholesale for events?
Are all wineries able to wholesale for events? So in Ohio, the two types of winery permits we would have are an A2 and an A2F, which in essence are really essentially similarly situated. So it could be possible that they would be able to wholesale and buy the product from them direct. It may also come to play though that Ohio, without getting really into the weeds, as I alluded to earlier, has that three-tier system. And so there's kind of the manufacturer level, the makers of the product. There's that middle tier, which we call the distributors, the companies that take it from the makers to the retailers, and then there's the retail, right? And so it could be potentially though on an A2, A2F side, is the product they have already provided to a distributor that has those rights to distribute that product? Or does the A2, A2F permit holder have a permit type which allows them to self-distribute to the retail side, which is a B2A permit? So you'd really kind of look depending on the situation, but it is possible that the wineries could sell direct to the temp location, the product that they have.
Now we have a lot of DORA questions, so I'm just going to start ticking down the list of DORA questions here for everyone. I might consolidate your questions a little bit, but we'll definitely get through all of them here. Do you have to
real quick, Devin?
Yes.
Real quick, I would also just piggyback on a different question you asked a few minutes ago about training. So there is that ask training, but it's also possible as a charity, you could go to a retail location, something else, and say, hey, could we hire, flat fee some of your servers to serve the product at our event, because maybe again they maybe are better trained or have that experience. So you don't necessarily need Susie and Billy with the charity behind the counter. If you wanted to have someone that you're paying to help provide that service, that's also potentially an option. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Excellent point.
But sorry, your question, Devin, on DORAs.
Sure. So the first question on DORAs is, do you have to reapply for the DORA status each year?
No. The provision in law, which is 430182, and again, our website has some of that information up there, if I can figure out how to get back to it. But no, you would not have to apply every year. I think the DORA statute actually talks about it's like valid for 5 years, and then the locals are supposed to review it, renew it type of thing. But like I said, we do have that on there, and for our purposes, once it's established, we kind of keep it in place until told otherwise or making changes to it. So we have localities that may expand the DORA, decrease the DORA, eliminate the DORA, right? Do different things, related to that. And like I said, our website has those resources about how that kind of works, but it would be in 4301.82 that kind of highlights all of how that works and the steps they have to go through depending on what the local government decides to do.
All right, now this is a sort of two different questions, but I'll just ask one, then ask the other one in sequence. One's not about the DORA, but the other one is definitely about the DORA. So the first question is, does the F2 permit allow an organization to have a bartender mixing drinks at an event?
Does the F2 permit allow a bartender to mix drinks at an event and sell it at the temporary permit event, right?
Yes.
So, yes, I mean, yeah. So if you had someone, as long as the product I obtained through my F2 was properly sourced and properly obtained, then yeah, I mean, I would be selling for on-premise consumption. So if I wanted to be able to sell a, Jack and Coke or something like that, I could do that.
All right, and the second question is kind of going back to when you were discussing the DORA and the special event waiving process of where you can and can't go. Can guests at an event who purchase their alcohol at the event within a fenced area leave that area and go into the DORA?
Yes. So if I heard you right, so if I have a temporary permit and it's a 10 by 10 square, right, and that's the permitted area, and then that just for discussion's sake, and I make a purchase of alcohol in that temp area, and then I step outside that cordoned off area and go into the DORA, that I can do.
All right, Kaylee has another question about the DORA here. If there is an event that has an F permit going on within the DORA, can you cross permits for that? So their example is, so a lot of communities have these First Friday events around Ohio. When that event occurs every Friday during the summer, can someone with a DORA cup enter and walk around the public area of the plaza that is having the event?
So I guess if I'm understanding the question correctly, it may depend in part on the DORA, how the locals created it itself, meaning the locals control when the DORA is valid, what the hours of the DORA are, right? All of that stuff, what days the DORA is in effect. So let's assume that we're talking that first Friday, let's just say this coming Friday, and let's say that the locals have set up the DORA in such a way that it's active on Friday at 7 o'clock, right? So I'm at a bar within the DORA, I buy a drink, and I can take it into the DORA. And then similarly, on this Friday, there's also going to be an F permit issued within the DORA, right, as defined by how big it would be. So again, if that's the fact pattern, I could take my drink from the bar, I could bring it into the DORA, but what I couldn't do is take my drink from the bar, bring it into the DORA, and then take that same drink into the temp permit. Because again, that's a temp permit's like any other retail permit. So I can't take drinks from one retailer to another retailer going through the DORA, can't do that, right? So I guess what I'd say is it'd be like, you know, my house, your house next door to each other. I take my drink out the front door, go to my sidewalk, you know, let's say the sidewalk's the door. Okay, I can consume it, but I can't take my drink in your house and keep drinking it. I'd have to get rid of it before I can bring it into your location. I don't know if that answers the question, but as I understood it.
Sure.
Could you be in the DORA? Sure, but you couldn't take it into that other temp permit.
All right, now there's several questions here about F2 permits and DORAs. So I'm going to go very quickly through a couple of these.
Okay.
So the first question is, if there's an F2 permit issued in a DORA area, are communities able to change the DORA hours so they are no longer in effect during the event?
Yeah, so this is, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I'm not currently serving in a lawyer role in my current role, but this is where I'll play lawyer and kind of deflect that question. And I only say that because, yes, I think the locals can do that, but I would defer to the local government, law director, you know, legal staff on how they would do that. Meaning, you know, again, it goes back to what was the ordinance, resolution, how did you set up the DORA, what authority, who does it give the authority to do that? You know, so I think it's possible. It just, again, you know, do you have to go back through the legislative process locally on creating a new resolution? Hey, we're going to suspend it. You know, when you created it in the first place, did you give the city manager, for example, the authority, hey, they can do this without coming through the council? You know, I don't know. And again, I think those are probably more locally controlled legal questions on how that would be played out, on how that would be situated. But yeah, so I you know, normally when hours are changed, we normally ask for those documents just really more for our records, right? But I would add with the DORA, we are not, that being the division, we're not enforcing the hours of the DORA. So we're not enforcing the types of cups you use. We're not, you know, we're not the DORA police. So we are not, you know, there's certain things you have to do in the statute that we have to look at. And again, on our website, it talks about that. And I don't know if you guys can see, I'll expand my screen. This is the DORA tab under local government resources. You know, what is a DORA? Where are they located? How many can a legislative authority create? How do they do that? What do they send us? What do we do with the information they send us? How do you expand or dissolve? You know, the 5-year review process, how we ask for street boundary information so we can see what qualifying permit holders are within your area to give them that designation. And then again, the open container exception. So there's all of that there. But as long as you meet the checkoffs for us, like I said, if someone calls us, well, they're not using the right cups. I don't know. Call your local officials and talk to them about that. The hours are, I don't know. Talk to your local officials about that. I don't want to participate in the DORA. Okay, talk to your local officials about how that process works. So I think on that end, it's possible, but I would defer to your local law director on how you accomplish that change.
And this second question here, you've sort of answered the first half of this question, so I'm just going to ask it more for the second half of the question. Does a DORA need to be suspended during an F-permitted event? And do they just need, and if so, do they just need to put up signs stating where one ends and the other begins for the specific event location?
So you said, do they need to suspend the DORA during the F permit? No, not necessarily. But then I guess your question on the signage, I mean, I guess what I would say is to that, and I'm not sure it's directly going to answer your question, but what I would say is that for signage purposes, both for the DORA and for a temporary permit, there needs to be some clear indication for not only law enforcement, for the consuming public, what are the boundaries here, right? And so, for temporary permits, we're not necessarily suggesting you have to create, 4 walls that are drywalled, taped and sanded and whatever. But are there like a rope line? Is there something, stanchions or something that would indicate to me this is in, this is out? Is there some signage to say can't remove the drink from beyond this, right? I've seen some DORAs, with the sidewalk that have the little, V-shaped thingamajigs, a very scientific term there, that, would say, hey, you're entering the door, you're leaving the door, here are the rules of the door, right? A little placard, whatever. So, I mean, that has to be defined, and it's just good to do, but I don't, again, I don't think you have to necessarily suspend it. Again, what I would say is, though, the law does indicate that you can't make the temp permit, or any permit for that matter, take up the whole space of the DORA. So you can't overlay them completely, such that you basically covered up the whole DORA.
Aaron has a couple questions here, and they're kind of revolving around the DORA. So the first question is, are there 2 types of F2 permits, one for DORA, one for not DORA?
No, they're the same.
And the second
one
question, go ahead.
No, as I say, there's just the F2. So whether it's within the DORA or not. And I would also add to that, if you got a temporary permit within a DORA, then, and we knew you were within the boundaries, you'll get that designation on that temporary permit as well. So temp permit would get that same designation like any other qualifying permit holder within the DORA to allow the people to take the drinks off the temporary permit premises.
And Aaron's second question is, can a temporary permit have multiple areas that are not touching?
No, it has to be contiguous. So any permit premises has to be contiguous or touching. We don't have, under that same temporary permit, we don't have in Ohio law really ways that you can disassociate either the DORA, for that matter, the DORA has to be contiguous, or create another DORA. Or like I said, you would have to have the temporary permit be contiguous as well. So you can't say, this square is temp permit F2, that square is the same temp permit F2, but they're in the middle, they're, railroad tracks is a bad example, but they're, severed by some intervening piece. They have to be contiguous and touching.
And part of another question that Aaron had asked, kind of referring back to that one. So as an example, can you draw a small boundary around multiple bars within a larger DORA? So each bar of the event can serve DORA drinks.
So let's say you had a square, and in each corner of the square you wanted a bar, right? and the square is the DORA, and then the top left is a bar, top right a bar, top, bottom left, bottom right are 4 separate bars. I suppose if you had 4 separate qualifying, orgs that could apply, I suppose equally you could have a qualifying org that can get an F and an F2, let's say, right? Then at the same time, right? So maybe I have an F permit and I also have an F2, and in the top left quadrant I have my F, and top right I have my F2. I mean, maybe that would be something that could be feasible, but you would have to have then those separate, in this case, temporary permits to be able to somehow make that work, right? Because again, you can't disjoin them and do that. So you'd have to, or you scrunch them in the middle, right? I mean, that's the other thing. You put them in the middle and you have, this side is the beer or the wine and spirit side, this side's the beer side, and they're all kind of in a square looking out in each direction. But yeah, I think you'd have to have separate permits at those different areas, because you couldn't, again, disjoin them from each other.
All right, 5 more questions.
Yeah, and let me add, Kyle, if I'm saying something wrong or not saying something sufficiently clear, feel free to chime in.
All right, Ben has a very specific question here. Where can we find out if a specific F permit is subject to local option elections?
So the F permit in and of itself, so I guess I'd say for temporary permits, there's kind of the general piece that says F permits, which is kind of the general term of art, but then there's actually an F permit, which is the beer only. That one is statutorily not subject to LO, but there are many others that are. So like I said, one area is on our temporary event tab on the left-hand side of our main page, would be a spot you can go to that has the temporary permit guide. That would have information about the different types of temps that are out there, when's it needed, what kinds are available, what orgs are eligible, stuff you can sell, all of those things. And it also has this little FAQ chart that we have on our website, which we actually need to update with a few of the additional classes, but it kind of goes through what's out there, when you can do the event, what you can sell, all of these types of things. Local option, does it apply, not apply, right? Kind of has those things there. But equally in the statute, it will normally tell you. And one of the phrases that is generally used is must be authorized, something to the effect of, it must be authorized for the sale of blank or blank within the location where the event's to be located. That's kind of the phrase, if you will, that would, if you see something like that, would kind of jump out and say, oh, okay, LO applies here. But I would also just throw out as a caveat to that, the liquor law in Ohio being created, in many ways since 1933, there are things put all over the place that make, in my opinion, no sense of where they're put and are totally disjointed. So, I guess that's the general thumb of things, but I could equally say there's case law, there's AG opinions from, one from like 1957 that talks about railroad permits don't need to pay a permit fee. You wouldn't know that if you look at the statute, but there's an opinion out there that has that. Or, there's case law that talks about a boat that traverses multiple counties doesn't fall under the quota. Say that in the permit anywhere. It's just case law that's out there you need to know. So my only point is, I think the place to look to start is the actual F permit itself. And if you see that phrase, that's probably going to give you that heads up. We also, as I said, have that chart. But just because it's not there doesn't mean it could be stuck somewhere else that, unless you asked or knew, you wouldn't know to go look.
Thanks, Paul. Carrie has a couple questions here. Is it typical to need a letter from the property owner beyond the signature on an actual permit application? I've had this happen, but not for any other application for a temporary permit I've submitted. What would be the reason for this request?
Can you repeat that question? I apologize.
Sure. So she's asking, is it typically necessary when you're submitting a permit, I'm not sure which permit she's referring to, but one of the temporary permits, to
Okay.
need a letter from the property owner where the event is being held beyond the signature on the application. And she's asking because she's had it happen before, and what would the reason be for that to be that way?
Yeah, so without knowing for sure, and Kyle, I think, is muted. He said he might have a opinion or response on this. I mean, in our application, we do have, and I'll go to like the F2 real quick. We do have, documents that, if applicable, we would ask you, kind of like a tenancy form that you would fill out. So, I mean, if you have that, I don't know that we'd really need, under Section B, for example, I don't know if there's anything we'd really need on a letter. The other piece occasionally is like street closures. So if you're telling us you're closing certain streets, we might need something, but I don't know, Kyle, if you're unmuted, I think.
Yeah.
Is there anything
So typically what would happen, the only time we would request additional documentation for like the real property owner in the form of a letter is if, say, the event's in the street or there's some sort of public sidewalk blocked or something like that. There's the additional layer needed where we need a letter from either the police or the local legislative authority just authorizing that closure. So there isn't additional layers except for if there's a shutdown of the public walkway or street.
Yeah, so I don't know, Devin, if you can see my screen, but here on, as Kyle mentioned, on that street closure, will there be any type of street, alley, public right? If yes, please attach acknowledgement. Could be a letter, could be something, preferably some letterhead of the local officials, right? That would say, hey, we're aware of it, we're good. And again, in part, I think from our perspective, trying to play nice with the locals as well, is we don't want to necessarily approve a temp permit and then they're selling stuff in the street, and then what the heck's going on? Who approved this? Well, what's this, right? So just from a public safety perspective, I think as well, just want to make sure that, hey, someone, local government's aware. If Johnny didn't tell Bobby locally, well, I don't know, I can't help you there, but at least someone from the local side has signed off and said, hey, we're good with this, we're aware of it, and we're on board.
And Carrie's second question is, can there be two beer gardens within a festival on opposite ends of the festival footprint for an F permit?
Yeah, so I mean, they can, as long as both selling points are captured within the designated boundaries that you've given to us at the submission of your application, then there's no problem having multiple selling points for the event.
Yeah, so I think to add on to Kyle's piece is, again, if you are applying under one org that meets the qualifications and you wanted to have a permit premises that's a rectangle, right? And on one end of the rectangle, I'm selling, on the other one, I'm selling, but on the same org within the same permit premises that are contiguously connected, fine. But if you want to have that rectangle, and on one end there's a small square, on the other end there's a small square, and you cut off the permit premises that in the middle is not permit premise, then no, you would need two separate F permits to be able to do that, right? Because those are disjointed premises. Again, I would akin it to a retail, right? If you are a retail permit holder and you're, Mary's, Soul Food or something, I don't know, right? And you're at 123 Main Street, you have a permit for that location alone. If you want to have a permit at 123 Broad Street, you need a separate permit under a different number issued at that location. I can't use the one I have at 123 Main and say, well, that applies over here too. No, it doesn't. I need a separate one, and they are distinct from each other. But I can't, expand them to be connected when they're not touching.
Thanks. So Dan has a question here about his C2 permit. We have a C2 for wine. We own our building above the retail shop and have available space for a tasting. What are our best options for doing that?
We just had questions on this today, and I guess it, I mention to our call staff a little bit. When I hear the word tasting, I guess I don't want to say I shiver, but I kind of shiver. I'm like, okay, well, let's first lock down what we're talking about, right? So, oh, I'm trying to think where we have that on there, but we have, it really depends on what you mean by tasting, what you're trying to do. And under our beer wine tab, under guides and resources, we have allowable sample tasting events, which would list different types of stuff that's out there. So one option is you could get if you qualify, you could get a D8 permit, which allows for tastings for certain fees to be had at the carryout locations that are normally carryout only, but in limited aspects would allow for on-premise tastings, right? So D8 is a potential option. If you have this space upstairs, and let me back up quickly, I guess, and say, like I said, with the word tasting, well, what does that mean? You could be a D permit restaurant and say, well, I'm gonna have a tasting and I'm gonna do flights of wine or 5 different beers and it's X amount and you get these 5, whatever, right? That's a tasting, but that's not, there's other types of tastings under Ohio law that are different. There are tastings allowed for in Ohio law that, let's say I come to a restaurant and I say, hey, what do you got to serve? Well, I have these different craft beers. Okay, don't know what those are, don't know what they taste like, really don't want to buy it until I know. So can I try a sample? Sure. And there's a provision in law that allows them to give small samples at no charge to the consumer to basically taste test it. And if they like it, yeah, I like that. That actually tastes good. Great. Now you purchase the alcohol. But then there's also tastings that are in Ohio Administrative Code, which are, one is like Rule 30 tastings. Rule 30 tastings would be for basically the maker of the product or someone who's representing them, we call them solicitors, could apply with us for a Rule 30 tasting. They buy all the product, they bring the product from their stuff, not from the retail side. It's a private invite only event, not on the permit location, right? And think of those more like your wine and cheese, right? Or your spirits with whatever, right? Hey, let's go through some reds, some whites, and we'll have some cheeses, and we'll talk about, how they pair and how it tastes and all this stuff, right? That's a Rule 30 tasting. Then there's also something under Rule 33 called bar spending. So that's where a manufacturer might go to a bar and I'm a consumer, I'm coming up to the bar, and let's say I'm with X brewery. Hey, see you want to buy a beer, can I interest you in our product? What they then do is they buy the product at retail from the bar that was purchased through the proper channels by the bar. I then, the maker of that product, or whoever I am, solicitor, whatever, come to the bar, buy the product, and then give it to the consumer within certain limits about how much, again, not general consumption here, to be able to, try to switch them. So again, I would go back to the Kroger, Giant Eagle, whatever, Meijer, whatever grocery store, you walk around, they have a little, Pepsi, Coke, hey, try this new flavor, try this, whatever. That's really like bar spending. And again, I would add, on most of those, it's not general consumption, similar as well to the D8, is for tastings, not to really basically convert you into an on-premise because you can't get a D permit. Another option is, would you qualify for a D permit and rather get a D2? And then, you could do that. But if you get a D2, you're going to now get into needing food requirements that need to be met. You're going to have 2 restrooms. So there's going to be some additional elements that you wouldn't have as a carryout, but that's also an option too. If you want to add that space, maybe that's something you'd want to look into, and you could do certain events under that. So I think it really depends what you're trying to do. I would also recommend heavily anybody, I know, and this isn't a promotion because I'm, a lawyer here, but I would always recommend getting an attorney who specializes in liquor law, certainly on some of these questions, that can assist and give the private legal advice needed. I know they, normally charge money and that depends on the fee, but, I was at the AG's before from 09 till 2017, prosecuting liquor cases with public safety, the division on their behalf. So many times saw people get into trouble, not because they were intentionally trying to do it somewhere, but just the ignorance of the law and, well, I didn't know, had I known, or I tried to do it myself. And man, there's so many times that if you had someone who knows what they're doing, has been doing it for a while, it can help guide you through, and $500, $1,000, whatever it may be, might save you headache, expense, time, whatever on the back end. So again, while we are here to help and more than happy to address as many of the questions we can, we also can't give private legal business advice for many reasons. And so, I always tell people, I'm like, I know it stings, but you might want to reach out to a lawyer on this, because they're really going to be able to take you through and guide you through that targeted advice you're really looking for. Which one place to start is we have under liquor control, about liquor control, we have our regulatory industry partners, and there's some different associations out here. Ohio Bar Owners, Restaurant Association, Wine Producers, Wholesale Beer Wine, Ohio Grape, that are out there that might be able to give you more targeted people on who to reach out to. You also have your bar association, state and local, but these industry specific associations might be able to direct you in a way that can get you to people who can best assist you on those, really specific questions that come up. So in answer to your question on the C2, maybe just depends what you're trying to do and what permit or how you want to do it to comply. So there's a lot of options that may be out there.
Final two questions here. First one is about fundraising. Can a 501c3 hold a private event in a museum for a fundraiser by charging an admission for the food and drink under an F4? The guest list is known and is not open to the public.
Well, that one's kind of tricky, because the point of sale happens at the ticket cost, if there's alcohol included in the event. From my understanding, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but from there, it's no longer fitting the category of a private, invitation only, no money exchanging hands type of event that Paul outlined earlier. That point of sale is happening on the front end, meaning that there is a monetary exchange. So it would require the permit, but I mean, how they run the F4, I guess, is really up to them, as long as they're following the guidelines. I mean, they can make it a guest list only, but if that point of sale is happening at the front end, then it would require the permit.
I think, Devin, that might be one that is a pretty targeted question, and I'll be honest, I'm just not as familiar with the F4 specifics, so that might be one too that might want to take away with a more precise question offline. Sure. That we can kind of go through, because like I said, that might be a little bit more of a targeted issue to really kind of, hey, what are we trying to do? When are we trying to do it? And then seeing if there's a way to get there. I would add, with our agency, if there's a way that we can do it within the confines of law and make it work, on our end, we are happy to try to do that. Sometimes that's not always possible, but we try to get creative or find ways that work within the parameters of law. So sometimes, like I said, it requires those extra conversations to really try and figure that out. But
so Brian, definitely send your question over to the Division of Liquor Control. They can get you worked out with that one. Final question. Can you go over the licensing requirements for alcohol that is sold to be consumed off premise?
The licensing requirements for alcohol to be sold and consumed.
I believe this was when you were talking about the sale of things like to-go cocktails.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess, one, if we're talking carryout permits, right, then that's what that is. I guess what I would say is this, as a quick backdrop to kind of cover that, is if I apply for a retail permit, whether it's on premise or carryout, and I would add on premises generally includes carryout, not always. There's a few that are on premises only. I think like the D5H, there's no carryout sales, which is like our community theater locations. But that being said, is certain things will definitely happen. One, we're gonna have agents come out and inspect the location. By law, we are required to notify any institutions, churches, schools, Public playgrounds within 500 feet of your location, they have a right to be notified about your permit application and have the right to object and ask for a hearing. On the retail locations, which are C and D permits, we also have to notify local governmental authorities, being city council if you're in a city, township trustees, county commissioners if you're in the township. They get notified, they have a period of time to respond. They can actually ask for an extension of time to respond. They can object, have a hearing as well, right? So that has to happen. You need to meet rules and regs that are set forth in law. Like I said, if it's a D permit, the statutes require you to have a food service operator's license or a food establishment license through your local board of health. You would have to have, 2 restrooms that meet certain quals, hot and cold running water, that type of stuff. Now there are some exceptions depending on the fact pattern of how that works within the rules, but those types of things all have to happen. As I mentioned as well, generally speaking, we're gonna have to check with Board of Elections. Where are you at? What's your status? I would also add, for those with the local side or working with local permit holders, and we've added this to our applications, know where you are and the address you are applying for. I can't tell you how many times we have people who apply who don't know their address, and I understand this gets tricky, trust me. Think they're in the township, they're really in the city. Think they're in the city, they're really in the township, right? Because depending on the type of permit you're looking for with that traditional population-based quota, I'd hate for someone to apply saying, oh, I'm in X city. No, you're not. You're actually in the township. We now have to cancel that application, move it over, and by the way, you lost your spot in opening because where you're going to is either dry or where you're going to has no openings, and because you told us here, which was wrong, we don't know, right? When you're applying, we're going to take your word that you're really where you say you are, and then we'll have agents go out. They're going to do their own confirmation with city engineer, county officials, whatever it may be, to verify the address. So going to an auditor's website, calling your locality, calling the city when you're applying for a CED or a revitalization district. Are you really in the boundaries? Because again, we've had people maybe think, oh, I'm in the village or whatever. They have this, applies to me. No, it doesn't. It's a certain area, defined. Figure it out before you send it in, because if you're wrong, you're wasting time. Or if you tell me it's 123 Main and you're like, oh, really, it's 345 Main, Board of Elections, because ward and precinct history is specific to a location. And if you change that location, that may then change the information they provide us, which then changes potentially your wet dry status because of the votes that apply to that. So, wet dry laws get really complicated. I've had people, well, they're wet across the street. They may be, and you're dry. Well, how did they get the vote to be able to sell that they did? Were they in different ward and precinct years ago that you weren't? And the votes happened when they were there and different now. So a lot of complexities. We have guides and resources that kind of high level talk about that. But like I said, those all are things that are going on. So that would happen there. With the drinks to go, like I said, it's in the provision 4303, I think it's 185, I want to say, yes. So that defines kind of alcoholic beverages at play, which is beer, wine, mixed, or spirits. Talks about who personal consumer would have to be, talks about the qualifying permit holders, which reverts back to the DORA statute and says, hey, we've already defined what a qualified permit holder is, look here. And in addition to what it says there, you can also add on an A3A, which is a micro distillery in Ohio that can sell certain products to consumers at their location. Talks about, that it has to be products that they otherwise are authorized to sell, right? So if you can't sell wine, then you shouldn't be selling wine out the door because you can't sell it in your bar, right? Talks about, sealed closed containers intended for off-premise consumption or via delivery to the permit or to that personal consumer. You can only do it if you sell a meal. Like I said, the law does not define what a meal is. In my opinion, use common sense, right? I don't know. Is a bag of cookies a meal? I'm not sure. Maybe for me, I like cookies, but I think again, common sense is the way to go. People try and get cute, get stupid. That's where I think they run into the problem, right? So use common sense on what a meal would be. And then it's one meal, I think, per drink as well, because you can't sell more than 3 I'm sorry, you can't sell more than 3 beverages per meal. So, you know, I can't have 1 meal sold and sell 10 margaritas with that 1 meal, right? It's 3 drinks per 1 meal. And then it also talks a little bit about, I thought it talked about consumer, like the sizes of them or how that would work as well. So as far as how much you can sell, but in any event, 4303.185 is the statute provision that talks about drinks to go that was codified. And that would be really where you'd have to go. I would also say public safety. We're not the ones that are going to be citing for that. So maybe that's where you pick up the phone and you call public safety and the local agents within that district that you're in and say, hey, looking to do this. What do you think, right? Not that what they tell you is you know, doesn't mean whatever, but at least I think, right, it gives you some assurance that maybe you're in compliance. Talk to your local law enforcement, you know, maybe talk to the local law director if they would talk with you about some of those things, because again, they're the ones going to be coming out there and, you know, responding to complaints or potential enforcement action. So my opinion, or your lawyer, if you have one, right, is to kind of have those conversations ahead of time to make sure you're trying to do it in compliance with law. And even if they come back and cite you, my view, right, probably not a bad idea to be able to walk into a hearing and say, hey, I called, I emailed, I laid it out, we did it exactly as we said we would. You know, we tried to do what we could to get ahead of it. I think at the very least, that's good, you know, mitigation, they call it, to show that you were making a good faith effort to do it right, as opposed to, yeah, I don't care, we're just gonna do what we're gonna do and let the chips fall where they may.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Kyle and Brandon, for doing this webinar with us today. And as Paul has reiterated many times, if you have questions, go to the liquor control website, reach out to them, ask them questions, because it's definitely something you're going to want to ask a question up front rather than getting stung by fines and fees and penalties later. Matt, I will turn it back over to you for any final comments.
All right, Devin, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully you got some great information from the webinar. We hope that you will tune back in on August 3rd when we talk about the glass industry in Toledo and how it helped build that city up. Thank you guys so much for the information. We appreciate your information and helping out our Main Street programs and nonprofits around the state trying to do good work. The video will be posted on our YouTube channel, and you may share that with others as needed. So thanks everyone, have a great day.